Well, a new study reveals that Americans' anxiety, economic anxiety, hitting an all-time high as we head right into this election. In fact, it's up 20% from last year alone. 39% of folks now saying that their financial situation is keeping them up at night.
Yeah, now you have a situation where I think it says 62% of Americans think that the system is rigged for one group over another, so people are not comfortable with it. And now when you look at both candidates, there's even more uncertainty because you know exactly what you get with Hillary Clinton, and that scares people. And on the other side, you don't know exactly what you get with Donald Trump. Has the opportunity to be good, but that also scares people. So right now, even deciding which candidate wins still doesn't bring any clarity to this uncertainty that most Americans are feeling.
Obamacare, as the U.S. Affordable Care Act is often called, was signed into law in 2010 and it took effect in late 2013. Its fate, though, is still uncertain. So here's the situation. President Obama has said 20 million previously uninsured people gained coverage. A number of surveys have found that the uninsured rate has fallen by roughly half to about 10%. The cost of Obamacare plans for individuals is set to rise by roughly 25% on average next year. Meanwhile, national spending on health care has slowed. Economists say at least part of that change may be attributed to Obamacare, which encourages shorter hospital stays and limits on unneeded procedures. But perhaps the most worrying development is the decision by several large insurers, including Aetna and United Health, to pull out of many of the exchanges. And many of the nonprofit co-op insurers formed after the law's passage have also failed. Here's the background. The dilemma in shaping Obamacare was how to preserve the country's system of employer-based insurance for the bulk of the population while ensuring access to coverage for people who are too sick or poor to afford it. Making it work required a combination of subsidies for middle-income workers, increased spending on Medicaid to cover more low-wage workers, as well as the so-called individual mandate. This is the unpopular requirement that all Americans obtain insurance or pay a fine. Here's the argument. Of the two main presidential candidates, Hillary Clinton seeks to expand it, while Donald Trump plans to ask Congress to repeal it in favor of a far less ambitious plan. Clinton's plans would probably result in more people being covered, but at a cost. Trump's plans would likely result in some people losing their insurance coverage.
Food shortages in Venezuela are so bad that even police officers are occasionally getting in on the looting of supermarkets and supply trucks. The trend has been captured in photos and videos several times. On Thursday, a truckload of sugar was raided by dozens of people in downtown Caracas. According to local media outlets, National Guardsmen initially tried to confiscate the truck when the driver couldn't produce the appropriate paperwork. Amidst the mayhem, one Twitter user captured a picture of a Venezuelan policeman walking away quietly with a giant bag of sugar slung over his back.
Sources say Deutsche Bank's finance chief told staff representatives last month at an internal meeting that job cuts at the bank could be double of what they were planning, a step that could remove 10,000 more employees. The company faces a multi-billion euro fine and a crisis of confidence among investors. Deutsche would not confirm the reports. If 10,000 job losses were ultimately to follow the 9,000 announced by management in October 2015, roughly 1 in 5 of the bank's workforce around the globe would be affected.
Satanists are setting their sights on a Tacoma elementary school, saying they want to hold after-school meetings and invite students to attend.
They say it's to counter Christian organizations that use public schools to preach their faith.
Well, that satanic group says they've been looking at schools in Mount Vernon and Puyallup. Now they say they're coming to this school in this North Tacoma neighborhood. The Satanic Temple says they've chosen Point Defiance Elementary School over other schools in Washington because it's closer to their Seattle headquarters.
You know, it's a closer school district than Puyallup or Mount Vernon to us. So, you know, we want to make sure we can get there and it's somewhat local.
Lilith Starr, chapter head of the Satanic Temple of Seattle, says the after-school clubs they've proposed are in response to Good News clubs sponsored by Christian organizations. Although she says the Satanic Temple won't be teaching kids about Satanism, but science and rationalism.
We're not there to teach kids to worship Satan or to be Satanists. We're not there to proselytize.
Christian clubs and other organizations often use school property for after-school meetings because they're public property. The Satanic Temple let Tacoma schools know they were interested in using Point Defiance School yesterday.
This group intends to file an application to run an after-school program, and they were asking what the process was, and so we're following up on that.
San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick has been taking a knee at NFL games during the national anthem as a protest against racial inequality and police brutality. Now, some singers are considering whether they want to get paid to sing the anthem at events. Grammy-winning R&B singer Anthony Hamilton has been paid to sing it in the past, but now he's considering if he'd ever do it again. He said, "I'm going to take a little time away from the anthem until it starts feeling like it's for me." Singer John Legend has also criticized the anthem, calling it weak, and opting for America the Beautiful instead.
With Halloween just a few weeks away, the University of Florida is issuing a warning about offensive costumes. This is a college, mind you, telling students to be careful of outfits that reinforce racial, cultural, or religious stereotypes. University leaders even setting up a 24/7 hotline where those who are offended or troubled by a Halloween costume can, talk with a counselor.
Well, if you've been paying any attention at all, you may have noticed there's a cultural revolution taking place on college campuses, and not in a good way. Campus craziness is what we're calling it on this show, and today's edition is pretty crazy. Well, a speaker at Harvard Law School says that terms like free speech may be racist and sexist. Harvard Law School graduate Kendra Albert told students that when non-lawyers use legal terms like free speech, they, quote, lose sight of the often discriminatory history of such terminology. According to the Harvard Crimson, which is a newspaper on campus, Albert also takes issue with the usage of the word defamation, which he says, quote, hides deeply sexist and racist and horophobic, which means anti-sex worker connotations. She went on to say that the power of these words is what makes them dangerous, and they deserve a second look. In other words, any word she doesn't like is dangerous and should be banned. Harvard Law School tells Fox News that speakers with a broad range of views speak at Harvard, which of course isn't true, but the institution doesn't take a view on any particular speaker's point of view, which is also untrue.
Free speech or something more sinister. A Dutch court has ruled that prosecutors can pursue anti-Islam politician Geert Wilders over comments in which he led a room full of supporters in chanting that they wanted fewer Moroccans in the Netherlands. We'll take care of it, he told them. Accused of discrimination and inciting racism for the remarks in 2014, he'll now face trial at the end of the month. Upholding the hate speech charges, the district court in The Hague rejected the Freedom Party leader's objections. Just because Mr. Wilders has never been prosecuted for his remarks or his party's views on Moroccans over the last 9 years doesn't mean he'll never be prosecuted for his comments about Moroccans. Wilders reacted to the court's decision by tweeting that he was being prosecuted for voicing the opinion of millions of people. Acquitted in court 5 years ago of inciting hatred against Muslims, Wilders' next trial comes as his far-right party is neck and neck with the ruling Conservatives in opinion polls. This with a general election due in March.
It's day 7 of WikiLeaks' much-anticipated October surprise, and we are now deep in the Podesta emails.
A week's worth of leaks consisting of emails from Clinton campaign chair John Podesta have been posted online, and reporters around the world are sifting through the roughly 11,000 documents, hunting for stories in the public's interest. Meanwhile, in today's leaks, we're learning about a different presidential campaign, the one which took place 8 years ago. An email chain released today shows Democratic strategist and Clinton ally Paul Begala discussing potential questions to ask voters with a pollster, including one about, quote, how Obama's father was a Muslim and Obama grew up among Muslims in the world's most populous Islamic country. Podesta claims the poll was being discussed in order to help Obama counter Republican talking points.
Common wisdom holds that half of everything you read on the internet is a lie. Speaking from the White House Frontiers Conference in Pittsburgh on Thursday, President Barack Obama told the crowd that while the internet has given us vast troves of knowledge, it's hard to tell when that information is false. What we need, he said, is a way to measure truthiness. Obama said, we're going to have to build within this wild, wild west some kind of curating function that people can agree to. His particular concern was the vast web of misinformation on the web about climate change. Obama said, everything on the internet looks like it might be true. Everything suddenly becomes contested. Obama recognized that it would be easy for fact-checking the web to start looking an awful lot like government censorship. He said, "The answer is obviously not censorship, but in creating places where we can say that the information is reliable. There has to be some sort of way we can sort through information that passes some sort of truthiness test."
Google News has introduced a new fact-checking feature just in time for the U.S. presidential election. The feature, announced on October 13th, is part of an effort by the tech giant to make it easier for users to check the accuracy of the stories they're reading. The fact-check label will now appear in search results on the Google News website and mobile apps, alongside other already used labels such as opinion and highly cited. In a blog post announcing the new feature, Google said, quote, "We're excited to see the growth of the fact-check community and to shine a light on its efforts to divine fact from fiction, wisdom from spin." While Google makes no reference to the U.S. presidential race in its blog posts, the launch comes less than a month before Americans will head to the polls.
Hillary Clinton's latest bid to win over voters is to talk up her own country. She's published an article on why she sees the U.S. as exceptional.
America is indispensable in part because we have the greatest military in history, with the best troops, training and technology. America is also indispensable because of our network of alliances built up with decades of diplomacy. But with all of these advantages comes a responsibility. We need to continue leading the world.
And she's certainly not the first person to push that idea.
I believe in American exceptionalism. My entire career has been a testimony to American exceptionalism.
America must always lead on the world stage. If we don't, no one else will.
After many protests and court battles, the Russian city Orel has erected the country's first monument to Ivan the Terrible, the ruthless 16th century first ever czar in all of Russia. On Friday, a ceremony was held where officers inaugurated the statue of Ivan on horseback, wielding a sword and a cross. At the ceremony, Vadim Potomsky said, "We have a great, powerful president who has forced the world to respect and defer to Russia, just like Ivan the Terrible did in his time."
Thousands in Ukraine have marched in support of their armed forces on the annual Defender of Ukraine Day. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko joined students of the Kiev Military Lyceum and members of the public in commemoration. Poroshenko first declared the Defender of Ukraine Day 2 years ago in response to the dispute with Russia over territory in eastern Ukraine and Crimea. The day has become a date for praising Ukrainian fighters in the conflict. It has officially replaced the long-standing February the 23rd holiday known as the Defender of the Fatherland Day, due to that holiday's connections to the Soviet era.
Italian troops will be joining NATO's mission in Latvia to beef up its defences against a possible Russian attack. On a visit to Rome, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg met with the foreign minister. The pair announced that 140 troops would be joining the Baltic mission by spring next year.
In recent weeks, Russia has deployed missile systems closer to alliance borders that could carry nuclear weapons. Allies are deeply concerned about this behavior. We will continue pursuing our policy of strong defense combined with political dialogue.
Italy will lead an ultra-rapid action force in the Baltic nation, equipped to intervene within 5 days in an emergency situation. Italy's foreign minister said the decision to send troops was not connected to recent events. Russia responded to the news with the foreign ministry spokesperson saying that NATO is building new dividing lines in Europe, while the leader of Italy's Five-Star Movement said Russia is a partner, not an enemy.
U.S. intelligence officials recently announced that the Obama administration is currently contemplating an unprecedented retaliatory cyber covert action against Russia after the Eastern European country allegedly interfered in the American presidential election. Intelligence sources have said that the CIA has been asked to deliver options to the White House for a wide-ranging clandestine cyber strike intended to target and embarrass the Kremlin leadership. However, sources have not been able to disclose the exact measures the CIA is currently considering.
The US and Russia are returning to the negotiating table in another attempt to secure a truce in Syria. This time, Turkish, Saudi, Qatari and Iranian ministers will join the US Secretary of State and his Russian counterpart to include the most powerful backers of Syria's government and rebels in the talks. The Russian foreign minister said he had no special expectations going into discussions in Switzerland. It comes 3 weeks after a US-Russia-backed ceasefire collapsed and the Syrian government, backed by Moscow, renewed its assault on Aleppo. Relations between Washington and Moscow hit a new low after the truce failed. Both accused the other of breaking the terms of the agreement.
Meanwhile, a U.S. nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the U.S. says Ronald Reagan took part in a South Korea-U.S. joint naval exercises today. The Ronald Reagan strike group includes 4 other missile cruisers and destroyers. Now, the drills are aimed at decimating parts of Pyongyang and launching preemptive strikes on the regime's military leadership if signs of a nuclear attack are detected.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un would almost certainly be killed himself if he ever used nuclear weapons. Daniel Russell, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia, told reporters that from Kim's perspective, he might have the ability to carry out a nuclear attack, but there is hardly any chance he would survive the overwhelming military response. Russell said for that reason, such a tactic cannot be his plan A. He also labeled North Korea's claim that it's developing nuclear arms for deterrence absurd and stressed the nuclear program weakens Kim's grip on power rather than making it stronger. These comments reflect Washington's toughest ever North Korea policy and come amid a wave of assertions from U.S. experts and politicians on the need for preemptive strikes on Pyongyang. Meanwhile, Russell also sent a message to China calling for the country to get tough on Chinese companies that aid North Korea's nuclear weapons program. He said if Beijing takes the investigations and punishments into its own hands, the U.S. won't have to do anything. But if not, Washington has the right to take action under UN Security Council Resolution 2270.